The shackles they pulled up off this wreck were empty. That is the part that stays with you. An underwater drone drops onto a reef 35 miles west of Key West, into shallow, sunlit water where the Atlantic meets the Gulf of Mexico. Its lights move across a scatter of iron on the sand. Cannon, pewter, trade beads, and shackles. More than 80 sets of them, far more than any ship needs. But there is no one in them. When this ship went down, the hold was empty, because the people the shackles were made for had already been delivered and sold, and the ship was sailing home. So the question this wreck asks is not what happened to the ship, it is what happened to them, the ones who were in these irons before the ship turned around and left them behind. New Ground Reef is a bad piece of water. It sits at the far western edge of the Florida Keys, where two bodies of water meet and the current fights itself, and in shallow water like that, a storm has nowhere to put its energy except into whatever is floating on the surface. Ships have died here for centuries. In the year 1700, one of them was an English merchant vessel called the Henrietta Marie. She was not a warship and not a treasure galleon. She was a slaver, a purpose-built commercial ship in the business of carrying human beings, one leg of a trade that England was running at industrial scale by the turn of the 18th century. 1700 was not the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, and it was not the end. It was the middle. It was the machine running at full speed. The Henrietta Marie had sailed from England to the coast of West Africa, taken on a cargo of people, and crossed the Atlantic. And here is where the ship stops being an abstraction, because we know what she did on the other side. She reached Barbados first, at Carlisle Bay, and she offloaded roughly 250 kidnapped Africans there. Then she sailed on to Port Royal, in Jamaica, and she offloaded about 190 more, 250 in one port, 190 in the next. Those are not casualty numbers. Those are delivery numbers. Every one of those 440 people walked or was carried off that ship alive into a slave market and was sold. That was the successful part of the voyage. That was the ship doing exactly what it was built to do. Think about what each of those numbers actually was. 250 people in Barbados was 250 separate lives ending as they had known them. 250 families in West Africa with someone missing from them permanently with no word and no return. 190 in Jamaica was 190 more of the same. And this was one voyage of one ship in 1 year, and the Henrietta Marie was one ship in a fleet of hundreds doing the identical thing on the identical schedule. The number is not the horror, the number is how the horror was filed. And then, its cargo gone, its holds empty. The Henrietta Marie took on a load of sugar, cotton, and dyewood, the products those enslaved people would soon be forced to grow more of, and turned north to sail home to England and do it all again. She never made it out of the Caribbean. Somewhere off New Ground Reef in the summer of 1700, a storm caught her. She went down in shallow water. Every man aboard died, but by then the only people aboard were the crew. The captives were already gone, already sold, already scattered across the plantations of Barbados and Jamaica under names their owners gave them. The ship sank empty, and it took the empty shackles down with it, and it sat on that reef for 272 years. In 1972, a diver named Moe Molinar found it. Molinar was a black Panamanian working on a salvage crews that comb these reefs looking for Spanish gold, for silver, for the treasure that makes headlines. What he found instead was iron, shackles, and a cannon, not treasure. Nobody on a treasure crew has much use for a slave ship, and so, like the San Jose on the other side of the Atlantic, the wreck sat mostly untouched for years, known but not understood, because the people who found it were looking for something else. It was not fully excavated until 1983. That year, a marine archaeologist named David Moore found the one object that turns a wreck into a name. He found the ship's bell. The bell came up encrusted in coral and hardened sand, just a shapeless lump. When the crew chipped the covering away, there was lettering underneath, and the lettering read, Henrietta Marie. After 283 years on the bottom, the ship told them what she was called. That bell is the reason this is not an anonymous pile of iron. It is the reason we can trace her back through the shipping records to Barbados, to Port Royal, to the 440. But the object that matters most on this wreck is not the bell, it is the shackles. Over 80 sets of them came off New Ground Reef, and that number is itself a piece of evidence. On a normal merchant ship of the period, a captain might carry 1 or 2 sets of irons. For a sailor who turned violent, for shipboard discipline, 1 or 2. The Henrietta Marie was carrying more than 80. You do not carry 80 sets of shackles to keep order among a crew of 25. You carry 80 sets because you intend to fill them, and the sheer count is a cold, precise measurement of how many human beings this ship was built to move at once. It is one of the largest collections of tangible evidence ever recovered from a slave ship, and much of it is now the only excavated slave ship in North America. And then there is the detail that stops people in the museum where these are displayed. Among the shackles, some are small, child-sized, iron restraints sized for the wrists and ankles of children. Somebody manufactured those. Somebody in England measured the wrist of a child and forged iron to fit it and shipped it to the coast of Africa, on purpose, as inventory. Sit with what that requires. It requires a foundry that made them. It requires a merchant who ordered them, knowing the size. It requires a captain who loaded them aboard without comment, alongside the beads and the pewter, as part of the standard kit for the voyage. Nobody in that chain objected. A child-sized shackle is not an act of cruelty by one bad man. It is a product. It came off a production line, it went onto a ship's manifest, and it crossed an ocean, because there was a demand for it, and no one involved thought the demand needed explaining. That is the thing the small irons tell you that the large ones do not. This was not rage. This was procurement. So here is the whole thing, laid end to end. An English ship sails to West Africa in 1700 and fills its hold with people, including children it has brought purpose-made irons to fit. It crosses the Atlantic. It sells 250 human beings in Barbados and 190 more in Jamaica. 440 people gone into slavery in 2 stops. It loads sugar and cotton, the crop those same people will now be forced to grow, and it turns for home to repeat the voyage. A storm takes it off a reef near Key West. The crew drowns. The ship sits on the bottom for 272 years until a treasure diver finds it, mistakes it for nothing, and leaves it. It takes another 11 years and a ship's bell to give it back its name. And what it leaves us in the end is 80 sets of empty iron. Some of them small enough for a child, as the only physical trace of 440 people whose real names were never written down. That is the Henrietta Marie. Nothing in that account is speculation. It is drawn from the shipping records, the excavation, and the artifacts themselves, and where the sources disagree on a number I will tell you. If this is your history and all anyone ever gave you was the sugar and the cotton and never the irons that paid for them, subscribe. That is what this channel is for. For most of the 20th century, that would have been the end of the story. A wreck, some artifacts, a museum case, history filed and closed. What happened instead is the reason we are telling it. There was a young boy in Detroit named Michael Cottman who watched an underwater adventure show on television and decided he wanted to learn to dive, which was not a small ambition for a black kid in a landlocked city in the middle of the country, in a sport that had almost no one who looked like him in it. He learned anyway. He became a journalist, and in the early 1990s, those two things came together because Cottman was part of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers, and the association went to New Ground Reef. They did not go for treasure. They went for the ship. Black divers went down to the wreck of a slave ship, a ship built to carry people who could have been their own ancestors, and they went down not to take anything off it, but to give something to it. In May of 1993, the National Association of Black Scuba Divers lowered a monument to the seabed and set it beside the wreck. It is a block of concrete weighing roughly a ton, with a bronze plaque fixed to it, and it was placed so that the plaque faces east, toward the African shore, thousands of miles across the water that the Henrietta Marie once crossed in the other direction with a hold full of people. The plaque reads, "Henrietta Marie, in memory and recognition of the courage, pain, and suffering of enslaved African people. Speak her name and gently touch the souls of our ancestors. Speak her name." For Cottman, the wreck was never just an artifact. He spent years researching the ship across several continents, and he wrote 2 books about it, and he said the site holds what he called spiritual turbulence. He put it plainly, even if the ship had not been carrying enslaved people when it sank, it still embodies the oppression of his people. The empty shackles do not make it empty, they make it worse. That monument has been on the bottom for more than 30 years now. In that time, the concrete has done what concrete does in warm, shallow water. It has grown a skin of coral and sponge. It is now a small living reef. The thing they lowered down to mark the dead has itself quietly filled with life, 20 feet under a surface so calm on a good day that you can see the marker from the boat. And people still go. This is not a story that ended in the 1990s. Just this past May, a matter of weeks ago, a group of black divers made the pilgrimage out to New Ground Reef again, part of a project led by a Stanford anthropologist who sits on the board of Diving with a Purpose. They descended to the marker. One of them said afterward that she had expected to look at it, pay her respects and be done, and that instead her eyes filled with tears and she told herself, "If you can be quiet, maybe they will speak." That is what this wreck is now, not a discovery, a destination. A place people who were told almost nothing about where they came from go to sit, 20 feet down, next to a ton of concrete and a coral-covered name, and listen. The shackles are in a museum in Key West now. The ones sized for grown men and the ones sized for children, in the same case, telling the same fact. We have the ship's name because of the bell. We have the count of the voyage because of the records. 250 in Barbados, 190 in Jamaica. We have 80 sets of irons because the sea preserved them. We do not have the 440 names. That is the arithmetic of this trade, on both sides of the ocean, every single time. It kept the bell and the shackles and the cargo manifest. It kept the number sold and the price they fetched. It never once kept the name, because a name was not required to record the movement of property, and so 440 people passed through this one ship and out the other side into 200 years of erasure, and all that came back up off the reef to speak for them was the iron that had held them. The monument faces east on purpose. It faces the shore those people were taken from, across the exact water they were carried over, so that anyone who dives down to it is looking the same direction they would have been looking if they could have looked back. Speak her name. The trouble is that we were never given it. That is what the divers go down to sit with, and that is why they keep going down.